Alright, so with the second season and streaming tomorrow, and so far garnering much better reception than the first did, that offer my belated thoughts on this one. And really, especially since I've been wanting to do it early in the year, if not longer, but again, lots of connection problems lately. So, what I can consider like a dark reprise of my Halo 2 video in 2022. Let's go over the first season of the Paramount Plus series Halo, based on the video game franchise of the same name, in a sense. So let's begin. Here's a brief bit of background. So this is one of several recent event series that actually started life as a movie, and it's very well documented. I mean, and that the initial pitch I was aware of was one that's produced by Peter Jackson and his company Winging Up Films, and to be helmed by a then up and coming director Neil Blomkamp, in which they were actually able to put together a pretty impressive bit of test footage that lasted about 8 minutes long, and he even later directed several short spin-offs such as the Warden of Dawn Han event. Regrettably, that version never got made, and other admitted fans of the games, including filmmakers from Guillermo del Toro and Alex Garland, and were at one point attached, but they also were not get made, and the TV show itself was actually going to be produced by Steven Spielberg and Ridley Scott, of all people. So, as you can tell, before they eventually got to where we did now, there was already quite a bit of upheaval, to say the least. To say nothing of the silver timeline, quote unquote, which is unique to the show. And attempts to meld together elements from both Bungie and 343's canon, as well as write its own material to try and appeal to a more general audience, and which, as I'm about to explain, has gone about as well as one would expect. To be completely honest, I did not hate it like a lot of other people online did. However, I also concede it's definitely the first season at least is not very good, even by the standards of video game adaptations. And then there in the long and checker past. Even in a time frame where Super Mario has made $1 billion worldwide, and both Detective Pikachu and the Sonic movies made respective 9 figure amounts of cash, as well as having other web series as Cyberpunk Edge Runners, the Castlevania series, among many others. There's regrettably disappointing video game adaptations is still very much a thing. But before I get into how even as someone who's not the biggest fan of the franchise, as in someone that the people were allegedly trying to target, I will go over the positives. The costume design, especially in the case of the Spartan armors, as well as like the prop weapons, are quite solid. I would say, especially with the 117 armor. And even though some of the visual effects do get kind of dodgy, as in not the remasters, but rather the original releases at points look better than this. For the most part, they work alright. And the music is also probably the best part. They do include snippets of the Mjolnir theme with. They didn't quite. I mean, it's not exactly Marty O'Donnell, but you know me. I kind of have a soft spot for vocalizing choruses in any score, or when they work well. And now I'm going to be unpacking in a lot of the issues, not just of the show's own making, but in terms of ideas that they casually crib from other science fiction works on the big and the small screens, at least. Okay, so in casting, I'm gonna be clear that for the most part I'm not familiar with the bulk of the people in the show. And for everyone I do recognize that fits, like having Jen Taylor be back do Cortana, his voice and likeness, Speen, even with her being implanted inside of 117, so no different than anyone else who bought a Microsoft device fairly recently. He You have ones like Bern Gorman as Vinsher from the UNSC. And a lot of his scenes, especially in the intergalactic like power struggles that the show often includes for some reason, just as well as these sets of these that's called the Rubble, which was apparently not destroyed in this canon, at least going by the wikis. He's he's just remind me a lot of the Expanse, which I definitely would recommend over this main in term if you're in the market for like a more the gray a a science fiction prestige TV series, and that also applies to other elements such as Madrigal apparently not being glassed, I mean as it was in the games, but apparently one of the subplots involves was like a revolutionary named Quan who is seeking to figure out her purpose as well. As a side note, I can't help but chuckle every time I hear the name. And I know that the game came out first, but now that Encanto has come out, is another one that shares that name, and even on this trailer made that joke as well. I just can't help but trying to have to stifle laughter among other things in the show, at least. And as for this quote unquote server timeline, they were trying to use to reach newcomers, it's not really working. I mean, since it's not like with Mario or Sonic or heck even Pokemon at this point, where there are elements that can be understood by fans who relatively new who to the series, fans who've been there from the beginning, and even finding ways of making the story comprehensible to people who know how to control their life. Again, bringing up Detective Pikachu, the Sonic movies, and the recent anime Super Mario reboot as well. Also, I mean, no matter which canon I'm going with, it's one of the densest science fiction properties out there. So they came up with something that simultaneously makes a lot of people who are familiar with the material not pleased with the changes, and it also acquires the new viewers, which the suits described as football dads and their teenage sons, and also require them to know a lot about it. So, in essence, since they were trying to core a demographic they were simply never going to reach, and admittedly, hey, it's not the only time that they've tried to do this. I mean, I've heard some people have some. This is more recent Star Trek spin-offs with the service, but even I admit it, I already had some exposure to those and was among people who was defending the earlier seasons, and those ones got better for time. With Discovery entering its final season, definitely found its footing in the history of the franchise, and Picard's case, the third and final season was a Fallen Legacy sequel to TNG, but that'll be another day. And the whole lot of elements there in terms of the characterization recall everything from the original version of RoboCop to Equilibrium with Christian Bale, to probably the most clear similarity has been noticed by myself and most others. In terms of making a flagship series for the streaming service centered around a individual mainly recognized by their suit of armor and often their morally gray stoicism, it's drawn a lot of comparisons, both favorable and otherwise, to The Mandalorian. However, I could argue The Mandalorian and thus far surpasses this one on multiple fronts. First, is a bit more nuanced in its approach to the character, and they built up the helmet removal over the course of the entire first season, and also slowly reveal more and more of Jaren's past with Newsy's parents in the Clone Wars and his his journey to learn how to trust people outside the creed once again. And I mean, by contrast, they made a lot of missteps with Spartan 117, whose name is John. And yes, that is definitely what they go with. Not only does he end up taking off the mask in the end first episode, we see him nude in the third, and most infamously, have him getting down with another character in episode 8, which is about as sensual as someone knocking a couple Lego minifigurines together, I suppose, given who owns a license, mega constructs together. I mean, naturally, the actor Schreiber has disowned all three of those elements. Apparently, he didn't want to do those elements any more than fans wanted to see them, which is a fair thing to point out. On that subject, that Mandalorian has elements that's familiar to those who are huge fans of Saga, who are relative newcomers to it, or just as people who are posting memes of Grogu in their Instagram feeds. Whereas even the silver timeline they went with in this show, does not make much sense whether you're are familiar with the lore or not. And in my case, not. It's even in terms of basic storytelling. I mean, there are a lot of elements that don't make a whole lot of sense to me. Especially in terms of how they handle the artifact, and again, while Mandalorian does a fairly solid job at focusing the journey and the characters at its core, or I think in this show, I think I know more about how a lot of these characters' pasts and the caste systems of these 26th century governments than I do about the giant weapon of mass destruction that the franchise is named after, which is a massive miscalculation to say the least. It's like if you made a Pokemon adaptation where instead of actually adapting material you have at your disposal, or you use a few vague elements from some material while mostly telling a story that's kind of all over the place. Believe me, we'll talk more about that next month. So, while there are many things I want to do with streaming service that involved of new Nicktoons and Legacy Nicktoons, new Star Trek and Legacy Star Trek, and not just the spin-off they're working on. This is one piece of unfinished business that I wanted to take care of before I moved on to something I enjoy. I especially with the Tomb Raider remaster collection coming out next week, and Dark Forces remaster coming out later in the month as well. And apparently I've heard that Season 2, so far at least, is better. But we'll see once it goes live tomorrow. So I gather that it's somewhere between like a saving throw and a do-over, where they actually focus more on the source material. But I gather there's even more and more details coming out how trouble production was. And that's not even getting into stuff like pandemic and later the strikes, how they basically had to change course as well. I've had to say for season 1 at least, very middle of the road opinion. I give it like a 3 out of 5, 2.5 at the very least. I mean, it's definitely not a 2 out of 5 or a 3.5 out of 5, I would say. It's just. It wasn't as bad as like the Resident Evil series on Netflix that same year, here, but it was mid. I mean, I would say. Hey, I mean, it's one of the more bizarre pieces of work I had to deal with. Thankfully, I got more stuff off in the pike as well, so especially since they replaced the showrunners who had to not be familiar with the games to ones who are big fans of them as well. Anyway, see you all again soon. Take care, everyone.